4 millennia ago. While the rest of humanity clung to the fragile edges of existence in scattered tribes, one civilization had already mastered the art of eternity. By the time we look upon this era, 2,000 years before Christ, Egypt was already old. It was a world fully realized, governed by absolute law, engineered by masterful hands, and bound together by a single, terrifying conviction. At its heart pulsed a river that did more than provide water. It dictated the rhythm of time itself. To understand the ancient mind, we must first understand this land, because here, geography was not just a setting, it was destiny. The Egyptians called their home Kemet, the Black Land. It existed as a verdant paradox, a narrow artery of exuberant life besieged by an ocean of sterility. The Nile did not merely flow, it breathed. In a world without engines, pumps, or modern fertilizers, the river's annual flood was nothing short of a cosmic miracle. It rose with mathematical precision, drowning the parched earth and depositing layers of heavy black silt that made civilization possible. This was not a disaster to be feared, but a resurrection to be celebrated. This cycle forged the Egyptian psyche. There was no chaos here, only reliability. Farmers did not just till the soil, they aligned their entire existence with a predictable universe. They understood that order, Ma'at, was the true law of nature. Beyond the green fields, the red land began. The desert, a vast natural fortress of heat and silence. To the outsider, it was a terrifying wasteland. But to the Egyptian, it was a shield, isolating them from the chaos of the outside world, preserving their history in the dry air, and keeping their culture pure. This binary world of flood and drought, life and death, was the stage upon which their entire history was written. We often imagine ancient Egypt as a silent land of gold and granite monuments, but the reality of daily life was built from the earth itself. The cities were loud, aromatic hives of humanity, clustered tightly along the riverbanks where trade and water converged. These were metropolises of mud brick, cool, practical, and ultimately temporary. The Egyptians accepted that human life was fleeting. A house might last a generation before the floods dissolved it back into the soil, only to be rebuilt upon the ruins of the past. However, if you looked upward, above the dusty rooftops, the logic of the city changed. The architecture of authority was designed to defy time. Palaces, administrative centers, and granaries rose in stone or reinforced brick, immutable and imposing. Cities like Thebes and the lost capital of Ichtawi were not merely places to live, they were machines of statecraft. Here, in the cramped and noisy streets, the hierarchy was absolute. Donkeys hauled grain, merchants bartered linen, scribes tallied the wealth of the kingdom. It was a complex, stratified society, functioning with the discipline of an army. The chaos of the market was an illusion. Underneath lay a rigid structure of law and labor that kept the massive population fed and functioning. To understand the soul of Egypt, one must look to the plateau of Giza. By this era, the Great Pyramids were already 5 centuries old, standing as ancient sentinels over the valley. But they did not look like the rough, eroded mountains we see today. They were flawless. Encased in polished white Tura limestone, they were designed to reflect the sun's rays with blinding intensity. But their true majesty lay in their creation. They were not built by aliens or magic, but by the sheer, crushing force of human will. Generations prior, armies of skilled workers, not slaves, but conscripted citizens, had hauled 2 million blocks of stone across the desert. With nothing but copper chisels, hemp ropes, and mud brick ramps, they raised a mountain to the heavens. It was the ultimate feat of organization, a national project that unified the entire country in a singular purpose. But why build such impossible structures? They were not merely tombs, they were resurrection machines. The pyramid was a solidified ray of sunlight, a ramp for the pharaoh's soul to ascend and join the sun god, Ra. Its importance was cosmic. The Egyptians believed that if the king did not successfully reach the afterlife, the cycle of the sun would fail, and the universe would collapse into chaos. These stones were heavy, with more than just weight. They carried the burden of eternal order. If the city was the body of Egypt, the temple was its soul. These were not public houses of worship in the modern sense, but the private, fortified residences of the gods. Built on a scale meant to humble the human observer, temples were cosmic engines. Every wall was a canvas of intent, every hieroglyph a permanent prayer designed to maintain the balance of the world. Inside the shadowed sanctuaries, the air was thick with incense and chanting. Here, the priesthood performed the secret rituals that kept the universe from unraveling. They believed that without their intervention, the sun might not rise, the Nile might not flood. By this era, the Great Pyramids of Giza were already standing as ancient relics on the horizon, reminders of a glorious, distant past. But the obsession with eternity remained. Kings of this age began to shift their focus. They built new forms of pyramids and eventually began to hide their tombs deep within the cliffs, seeking protection not just for their bodies, but for their treasures and their legacy. In a world of cycles, stone was their bid for immortality. These monuments were not dead memorials. They were active portals, ensuring the king's transition to the stars and, by extension, the survival of Egypt itself. Yet the weight of this massive civilization rested entirely on the shoulders of the ordinary. The farmer was the heartbeat of the state. His life was a grueling dance with the seasons, breaking the hard earth with wooden plows, managing irrigation canals, and harvesting the grain that fed the empire. In the workshops, artisans turned raw matter into masterpieces, while the scribe, the silent architect of Egyptian power, recorded it all. In a world where literacy was rare, the ability to write was the ultimate authority, a magic that could turn a bushel of wheat into a permanent record. For the common man and woman, faith was not abstract. It was woven into the fabric of the everyday. It was worn on the skin in the form of turquoise amulets. It was whispered in simple prayers for healthy childbirth or a good harvest. They did not fear the afterlife. They spent a lifetime preparing for it. They believed that death was not an end, but a horizon, a transition to a field of reeds where life would continue, lush and perfect, forever. This belief provided a profound resilience. It gave meaning to their labor and dignity to their existence, binding the peasant in the field to the pharaoh on the throne in a single, unified purpose. 4,000 years ago, Egypt was more than a kingdom. It was a monument to human resilience. Through discipline, engineering, and a profound belief in order, they tamed a river and built a world that outlasted the very stone it was carved from. Modern civilization moves at the speed of electricity, fractured and frantic. But ancient Egypt moved to the pulse of the Nile, patient, powerful, and eternal. It reminds us that a civilization is not defined by what it destroys, but by what it sustains. This was Egypt, not frozen in stone, but alive in time, belief, and memory.